Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica, Imperialis and to today's video. Sorry, haven't uploaded in a while. Again, apologies. Today is a My Thoughts On video, and it's one that I feel like I've made before, or it's certainly a conversation I've had with people before. I want to talk today about releases, in particular GW's release schedule. Like I say, I feel like I've made this video a few years ago, but here we are. Now, at the moment, a lot of conversation amongst the hobby community is around the price rises. This is completely understandable. There's a cost of living crisis, particularly in the UK, and GW's prices going up is not a good thing. It never is. I'm not defending them. I'm not condoning them at all. But something that I think gets missed, or something that we don't always talk about as to why those price rises are such a problem, is the release schedule and how often things get released. Now, for those of you who are newer to the hobby, this is going to sound a little odd because you're just used to things coming out once a week, every week, and that was that. The pandemic caused the disruption, but in general, for the last few years, it's been every week, here is a release, and it's normally quite a chunky one. That's not how it used to be, and nowadays, I think the new release schedule, whilst clearly effective for GW and making them money hand over fist, is not good for the hobbyist community. Let me explain why, because I get the feeling that some people are going to disagree with me. I'd like to explain why. So I'm going to split this into sort of two categories. One is about the risk of burnout and all things around burnout. And the second is one that's more about obsolescence, things becoming obsolete and no longer usable anymore. And I think talking on the burnout side, this is going to be a bit more personal, and that side is going to be a bit more true for everybody. So, burnout. I've talked about burnout before. I had a real issue with burnout a few years ago in the hobby and around the time I started this channel. But burnout is when, well, you'll probably have your own definition, but for me, it's when you lose interest and lose a passion for something that you really enjoy. At least that's how I personally look at it. And for me, hobby burnout is when, oh, I don't want to paint these models. Oh, I don't want to go and play games, etc. I don't want to go and do the reading that I want to do, etc. That to me is hobby burnout. And the release schedule, I think, for some hobbyists is contributing to that. Because one of the things that is most intimidating for a hobbyist to stare down is, at least for me, is an unpainted pile of frames. Or a built and unpainted pile of models. The pile of shame, if you like. I mean, we even call it the pile of shame. That should tell you how that idea is viewed in the hobby community. It's not seen as normal or the done thing to have a bunch of models that you haven't completed. It's just expected that you'll have all your models built, all your models painted, etc. And this is something that you can get over. It's something I've been working my way through for the past 6 to 18 months, is very slowly picking my way through my unpainted miniatures and trying not to buy any more. So I've worked my way through some Daughters of Cain that I had left unfinished, some Orcs that I had left unfinished. I did get the new Orcs, but I didn't get as many as I normally would, and so on. And I even, for the first time ever, sold up. I'm selling a giant pile of my Lumineth at the moment. They'll probably already have been shipped by the time this video comes out, so sorry, no offers accepted. But I had so much Lumineth that I lost interest in wanting to paint that I just sold it. I just sold a chunk of it on. And this is deal withable. You can deal with it, but when you've got a giant pile of unpainted miniatures, there's nothing more scary than going, oh god, I have to paint all that. Especially when, as many of us do as adults or young adults, we have busy lives to lead. We have a lot to do. We have social commitments, work commitments, etc. We don't always have a huge amount of time to hobby. And if you want to do a good job and get something painted to the standard that you feel is enough, especially if you're not someone who's experienced with contrast paints, it takes you several hours per miniature and you just don't have the time to invest in that. And that can really contribute to people going, you know what? I just can't. Forget this. I'm selling it. I'm out. And whilst this is not new, I think it is exacerbated drastically by weekly releases. Back in the day, and I know I'm going to get a little bit old man yells at cloud here, so bear with me. Back in the day, there was one big release a month. One. There was, for example, in the 6 months of 2008, the last 6 months of 2008, when I joined the hobby, there was 5th edition 40k, and nothing else came out that month. Nothing. No box game even. It was just the rules, a few basic starter kits, and some battle forces, which were no new miniatures. They were just collections of models that stuck around for the rest of time. Battle forces were start collectings at the time. Next month was Dark Elves. They got 1, 2, I think it was 2, maybe 3 new units, a couple of new heroes, and that was it. There was like a unit for Forge World and maybe a box of Middle Earth and a couple of books from Black Library, but that was it. Next month, Assault on Black Reach. I didn't buy that White Dwarf, but the boxed game for 5th edition came out 2 months after 5th edition. And the month after that, 3 months later, we got the 5th edition Space Marine Codex. We didn't get another 5th edition Codex for at least 3 months after that. 4 or 5 months after that was when we got the next 5th edition Codex. It was genuinely a slow burn release schedule where you could plan out for the month, not the week, the month, what you were doing. And things weren't teased, there weren't preview shows to say, look at all this stuff that's coming in the next year, for example. There was none of that. There was no rumor engine. There were no reveal streams. You got what you were given month by month, unless you were someone who went on the forums and looked at leaks. And even then, that wasn't so prevalent because it was 2008, not 2020. So, for a hobbyist like me who was just getting in, I was given a slow easing into the hobby. I was shown, this is 40k, here's a box game if you're looking to get into 40k. Here's a codex for an army that you may have bought in the box game. I'd gone for orcs as it happened. But also, here's a focus on fantasy. You're going to get a month with a focus on fantasy. And the releases for the month were listed in a catalogue in the front of White Dwarf, about 8 to 12 pages, depending on the month, of releases. And then there was Warriors of Chaos got a box. They got their army book as well. And then it was Christmas. So you got the different Christmas battle forces, battalions or armies or whatever they called them back in the day. The special Christmas boxes. That's nothing new. It was a very slow burn release schedule where you didn't know what was coming month to month. There were occasional teasers, but that was about it. And you could see for that month, if you were planning out your investments and your paycheck, you knew exactly what you could buy that month and when it was coming out. Nowadays, that 6-month run of edition, box game, codex, army book, that 5-month run, I'm going to ignore the Christmas boxes for a minute, that would be done in about 6 weeks, not 5 months. The edition and the box game will come out together, and then there'd be another week given over to sub-editions of the box game. The Space Marine Codex would be a 1-week release, maybe 2, and the Fantasy/AOS armies would be a 1-week release, because that was all that was needed. It was 1 week's worth of releases. And so the release schedule has sped up drastically, and if you are wanting to invest, you know that it's going to come around again more quickly. So you are limited in the time it takes before things get updated and you buy another new shiny thing. And because it's just constant overload, and there's more game systems now with Kill Team and Underworlds and Necromunda and Aeronautica and Titanicus and Heresy, etc. Because there are more game systems, there's more ways you can invest, and thus even more chance that you're going to get hit with a new shiny thing. In the last 6 months, I'll include the next month or two as well. So from October to April, Orcs and Tau and Daughters and Deepkin have all got new books and miniatures to accompany them. Ideneth and Daughters got a box game and a unique miniature. Tau got a unique miniature, and Orcs got a new wave of miniatures. Plus, Cities of Sigmar, the other army I play, got an update in White Dwarf with some additional rules. And Slaanesh, okay, they haven't had anything for a while, but they've still not an old army. They only came out a year ago, give or take a year ago. The release schedule is so much faster, and so if you're trying to stay on top of releases, the pile of shame builds up much more quickly as you are encouraged to buy, now, go, FOMO style advertising. It piles up and it can overwhelm you. Now, I know that that's a personal anecdote, but it's true, and it's happened to me. I've gone, oh god, yeah, Lumineth, go, get out of here. And I love the Lumineth models. I love them to death. But they were so long to paint and so intimidating for me to paint that it wasn't worth keeping all those models that I'd spent all that money on. So I just sold up and got rid of them. And that moves on to the second half of it, because I mentioned it very slightly, which is the idea of obsolescence, things going out of date. In the last 18 months, I've lived in this flat, and I'm going to put on screen now a picture of every single book I own that has been retired and rendered obsolete and useless in that time. So, picture. That is how many books have gone out of date since I moved to this flat 18 months ago. What even is that? It is ludicrous how quickly things become obsolete. And yes, I know that's because I collect a lot of armies. I'm aware of that. But let's go back again to those older times in the old man yells at cloud mode. 5th edition came out in 2008. I bought the Orc Codex, and I got a rulebook out of Blackreach, and one of my other friends got a rulebook out of their Blackreach, and our Warhammer club lasted off of those 2 or 3 rulebooks for 5 years. From 2008 to, I think it was mid-2012, when 6th edition came out. Our entire time at secondary school, pretty much we played 1 edition. We never needed to buy an updated book, because most armies didn't need an updated book. Most armies didn't get a 5th edition codex, it's worth bearing in mind. And the armies that did, okay, fair enough. But Chaos Marines didn't get one. Orcs didn't get one. Tau didn't get one. Eldar didn't get one. Tyranids did. Dark Eldar got an entire range rebrand. Right, I guess my mind's back. Necrons did. Space Marines did. Guard did. But there were only about 10 or 11 factions at the time, and half of them got redone. The other half didn't need it. Now, you can reliably expect that the average book will last about 3 years before it gets replaced. 3. And due to the increase in quality of those products, going to full colour artwork and etc., and being printed in full colour, the higher quality paper, the hardbacks instead of paperback, those books have gone from costing £10, £12 when I started out to costing over £30 after the upcoming price rises. They cost now nearly 200% what they used to cost, and they are going out of date 50% to 100% faster. That is where you get hit on the financial cost of the hobby, because the models are expensive. Yes, they are. But if you buy a box of minis, that box of minis, with a few exceptions, will never be unusable. The Orc boys I got out of Blackreach in 2008 are still legal as long as I put them on 32s. The first elves I ever bought, yeah, okay, a lot of them were high elves from the Island of Blood, but, okay, they got retired. But a lot of the other stuff I've bought from Fantasy has carried over. The Dark Elves I got at the start of Age of Sigmar are all still legal. They've been split up into new factions, but they're all still legal, with the exception of the Sorceress on Cold One. That's it. And that's a unique exception because there was a completely new game released. All the 40k models I've ever bought are still legal. Some of them have been replaced, some of them have been updated, Gazkul, Boys, etc. But you can still use the old models. As long as you put them on the right basis, they're still completely legal. And that's the difference. The books that I bought all that time ago have been redone 4 times. 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. 4 times they've been updated. Even the Tau, who I've owned now for just about 5 years, just over 5 years, my Tau have been updated twice since then. And there was the Farsight Enclave supplement that came out. And the editions have updated twice since then, with 8th and 9th as well. Not to mention all the expansion books, things like Saga of the Beast, or The Greater Good, Psychic Awakening in general, Gathering Storm, the Vigilus books, etc. The Warzone books, and all of those things. The cost of the books is so high, if you want to stay on top of the rules and get all the rules you want, that it is arguably prohibitive. And I know what some of you are thinking. Well, Tactica, if you want all the rules, just list build on something like Battlescribe. It's got all the rules there. You don't need to do anything other than that. And if you want like all the White Dwarf and expansion books, just go online and Google them. And yes, absolutely, you can do that. But it's not the point. I shouldn't have to be advocating for people to resort to using other people's resources, like non-GW affiliated resources, to get the rules at a good price. Plus, there's not a guarantee, unless they're literally taking screenshots and photographs, that they're actually going to be perfectly appropriate. I remember I built my High Elf army back in the day using Scribd. I don't even know if Scribd is still a website, but I built my army on Scribd for my High Elves, because I didn't want to go and buy the High Elf army book because I only had a tiny amount of elves. So I did it on Scribd. I shouldn't have to do that. And nowadays, it's more and more like that's what you have to do. You can't even do it for the core rules, because yes, GW, you can say, oh, the core rules are available for free on our website. Yeah, that's great. They're the core mechanics. You want actual missions, points building, army design, detachments, army structure, battalions, narrative play, matched play, organized play, etc. You need to buy the book. And yes, you could argue that they are supplemental exceptions that you don't have to play the game, but most people, GW included, use match play rules. And so the missions, you have to buy them. And let's not get started on the mission packs that are now in the General's Handbook saying, these are the missions we will play this year. You'd better buy this book for 20 odd pounds, otherwise you can't play in our stores because you don't know what the missions are. Oh, that is not good. Not appropriate. I did the maths of it, and the average amount you have to pay per year to stay up to date with the rules, if we assume that there will be a new General's Handbook every year, or chapter approved, a new rulebook every 3, and a new codex or battle tome every 3, so we'll divide those by a third, the average upkeep per year, at the moment, this is before the price rises, is approximately £43. Your mileage will vary depending on exactly what it is for you, but about £40 to £45 per year to be up to date with the rules. For rules admin. For admin. £45 a year. Not to mention any rules in White Dwarf or in expansion books that are relevant to you, like Warzone Charadon, Warzone Narkmund, or Broken Realms, or Gathering Storm, or whatever. They're an extra expense for that particular year. Through the course of an edition, you will probably spend £150 on rules. On rules. Just to play the game. No models, just the base outgoing you have to pay to play the game over the course of an edition is like £150 to £200. And that's for one army playing one game system. If you play both, double that. If you play 30k, okay, 30k gets slower releases, so maybe not so bad. But if you play 40k in AOS, it's like £300 to £400 a year on book admin if you play one faction. One. No allies, nothing. One faction per game system, £300 to £400 an edition for rules. Go and stick it through a calculator if you don't believe me. Just genuinely work out what it costs you to buy the books that you bought in 8th edition for your one army. Work it out. Go on. It will surprise you how much you spend on books. So yeah. Between the burnout of buying new models all the time and being new releases shoved in your face all the time, combined with the requirement to spend huge sums of money for rules that, particularly in this era with the pandemic, you can't even use most of the time, and you start to see why the release schedule is such a problem. Yes, it means that more people get more updates more often. You're not going to go 8 years, or like the Drakari did, 20 years without an update. Absolutely. Great for you. There'll be new miniatures coming for you on the regular. New hobbyists will always know there's something that will come for the faction they choose to invest in. And that's great. But then once you're in, they get you with the cost of having to stay up to date. Oh, you need to buy this and that and this. Oh, you're going to need those. You also need to buy some data cards. You might want to use some data cards. You don't have to, but it'd be really convenient if you bought yourself some data cards as well. Oh, and you're also going to need all your paints, and I haven't even talked about paints or anything like that. It's overwhelmingly fast and expensive. And as someone who works with young people and wants to introduce them to the hobby, I cannot, in good conscience, say, this is a hobby you should invest in. I know. Me, someone who made a video a year ago about why I love Warhammer, and I do, I cannot tell anyone I work with in good conscience, you should invest in this. Because it is so expensive and so fast in its releases, at the cost of those releases, that it just won't work. And it will price them out, and it will potentially do some serious damage to their finances. And that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. So what do you do about it? Well, you could obviously slow down the release schedule, but we know GW is making a killing because they release so many miniatures and so much stuff that they're just making giant piles of profit. Never mind the environmental cost of all that paper that is being obsolesced in 3 years. They're making a killing. So I don't think they're going to do anything. But I think now is the point, and it probably was the point several years ago, so sorry if I'm late to this, that we digitize the rules. Not only do we digitize them, we make them borderline free. Like, separate lore book, rule book, separate them, sell the lore book, because that lore's not going to change, and you probably don't need to buy them all that often. So you've got the core lore, 10, 15 quid, like make it like a novel, maybe not a novel, like a guidebook for 10, 15 quid, or 20 quid for the rule book equivalent, and make the rules available for nearly free. Put them on an online system which can be easily accessed and printed if people want to print them. Make it a printable document, but make it like 5 quid. Because, you know, you do have to pay somebody to write the rules. So make it like 5 or 10 quid per book. I guarantee you will increase the amount of people experimenting with different splashes of armies because they are used to the high model prices and can accept buying one box of expensive miniatures if they only have to pay 5 quid supplement for the rules. And that also means that when the rules are updated or patched or whatever, then the changes take effect without the books being rendered useless and out of date. Looking at you, Custodes, and looking at you, Space Wolves, as well. And also Daughters of Cain. Hi, you got your second battle tome in a year. And Lumineth, you had 2 battle tomes in a year. I hope you enjoyed spending all that money. Ugh. Anyway. I think that now is the point. The ship's probably already sailed, but at least catch up. Digitize the rules and make them cheaper. Like 5 or 10 quid. And that gives you unlimited patches and balance notes added to that document every single time they update stuff. You can keep White Dwarf, keep putting rules in White Dwarf if you want to, but then have those rules be publicly available as a free DLC patch to the codex that that person owns, so that they have access to all that stuff. And you can still do campaign books with unique missions and narrative scenarios. You don't take away that source of income. You just make the rules freely available. And maybe you don't make Crusade freely available. Maybe tournament organisers should pay £5 for the organised play booklet, and narrative players should pay £5 for the Crusade or Path to Glory booklet. Whatever. I genuinely believe that would be the best way to keep people invested in the hobby. The expensive models that last 30 years, people can cope. It's not great, but you can budget for it and say, okay, I'm just not going to invest this month. I'll save up and I'll slow down my purchasing rate, and that will be fine. But that will only work if you slow down the release schedule, which they're not going to do. And it would be supplemented by making the rules cheaper and not out of date so quickly. If you slow down the release schedule, then the health of the game is more easy to assess. And you don't need to put out new editions every 3 years. You just don't. 9th edition's more than halfway through its life cycle. Think on that. 9th edition is over halfway through its life cycle. Anyway, that's just my opinion. And I appreciate I've probably said some things that not everybody agrees with. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you like the weekly release schedule? Do you think the monthly release schedule would be better? Or do you have a model to propose for how they might do it in such a way as it doesn't cause such burnout and price issues and just tariffs for hobbyists? What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you. But for now, thank you very much for watching. This has been Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Bye for now.